Hi, everybody, and welcome back to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast presented by Fight Chicks. I am your host, Jim Graham. Alongside me is my co-host, the Juice, Dave Sadler. And also for the headline portion of the show, we will be joined by Ray Flores of ESPN 1000 in Chicago. On this week's show, we got some headlines to go over, including some big-time fights announced in the UFC. Of course, we have a preview for Invicta 11 this Friday, and also this Friday, the huge British invasion card for Bellator 134. And of course, we will end the show with our picks for UFC 184 from Los Angeles, California at the Staples Center as Ronda Rousey defends her title against Kat Zingano. And there he is. He is the Juice, Dave Sadler, all excited for this weekend. And how's it going, Dave?
Flores is on the show with us because hold on, here it comes.
This guy over here, Ray.
You know what? See what I'm doing there? I've got friends in low places. Jim and Ray are with me because I've got friends in low places.
Now, I may be a friend in low places, but definitely Ray is a friend in high places. He's
Very high places.
He's a big guy.
No. I'm in low places too, boys. You know what I mean?
No, I tell you what, Jim. I was crushing it in Detroit this weekend. I stole your catchphrase in your city.
Yeah.
It was 2 hours and 40 minutes of Garth Brooks. That was pretty amazing. I got to see Canada. Got to see Comerica Park. It was all pretty awesome. And I can honestly say in all of the 3 years worth of shows that we've done, this is my favorite show. Because the time is actually now. 3 days away.
All right, and Ray, how are you doing, my friend?
Man, oh man, guys, I am doing very well, very busy with all the combat sports news that has broken over the past week, guys, and looking forward to jumping on a plane and heading to the West Coast for a big night of boxing on Friday night.
Sweet.
All right, well, let's start first, as I mentioned, some of the big fights here with the UFC. Some of the fights we knew were going to happen, just they finally nailed down a date. Others, we weren't sure what was going to happen, but let's start first with the title fight in the welterweight division. Robbie Lawler versus Rory McDonald 2. That has been announced. Of course, we now have the John Jones against Anthony Rebel Johnson. That is all set. And we also, another title fight have set, UFC 188 from Mexico City. We will have the unification bout between Fabricio Verdum and Cain Velasquez. Oh, and not to mention they officially announced Jose Aldo against Conor McGregor. Same card as the Robbie Lawler fight that is tentatively scheduled UFC 189 in July. So a big summer of fights, fellas. 4 title fights on 3 of the summer's pay-per-views. We'll start first with Ray. Your thoughts on these big title fights coming up here for the UFC in just a few months?
I think it's great. I think it's nice that they are, at least right now, guys are healthy, and Cain Velasquez and Fabricio Verdum is going to be very interesting. Coming up in June in Mexico City, also Johnson and Jones should be a lot of fun. And then obviously McGregor and Aldo and Robbie Lawler should be able to bring the house down with Rory McDonald. So, but my only question, guys, and I know we're going to jump into it, is I know the UFC mentioned or made this announcement, mid to early last week. With what the news that we saw with Mayweather-Pacquiao, I would have held off, knowing that discussions were ongoing, and not stacked that May card, because from a pay-per-view standpoint, it is going to be very hard for consumers to drop down $100 and then come back 3 weeks later and then plunk down another $60 for a card that is whatever UFC number it is, in May.
Before we get to you, Dave, I just want to make also that Jones-Johnson card does have Vitor Belfort and Chris Weidman. So 3 fights here for the summer with that'd be 5 title fights. I said 4. I just wanted to make the correction. I forgot they added the Vitor and Weidman rescheduled for that. So I don't know. Maybe this is a trend here for the UFC fellas, because they never used to do 2 title fights that often. Now all of a sudden we're getting three upcoming cards with 2 title fights. We have UFC with the Dillashaw Brow 2, and then we're also going to have Dodson and Horiguchi. Then we're going to have McGregor and Aldo. Then we're going to have Lawler and McDonald. Then they're following that, with Jones and Weidman, or Jones against Johnson, Vitor against Weidman. Is this maybe an answer to the UFC's drastic bad year in pay-per-views in 2014 by putting all these multiple title fights to tell people these are can't-miss events? They have 2 title fights. And, of course, UFC 185 is coming up here. That has 2 title fights. Is this a way maybe to try to regain some of the pay-per-view buyers that they lost in 2014?
I think it's a way for them to gain pay-per-view buyers, but I think it's a way for them to alienate not alienate. This is a way for them to they're starting to turn into the WCW of back in the day, because you're selling cards. There's an actual Twitter account that says skip UFC 184 because it's only Kat and Ronda and Holly Holm and Raquel Pennington. This is a good card. 184 is a decent card if you look at the people who are on there. The problem is they're not building any names. How there's not a special on Fox Sports 1 on Kat Zingano, and the fact that she's the first mother to ever win a fight, and why she's not on Fox Sports Live, and all these different things is beyond me. She's the most likable person on the planet, but they're not even building her up. And in 4 days, she could be the face of 135 pounds. They're not building these people up. Do you realize Sunday morning when we wake up, it's theoretically possible that Ronda lost, Cyborg lost, and Holly Holm all lost in 1 day. That completely shatters the 135 and 45-pound division. But they're not building anybody up. Nobody knows who any of these other people are on the undercards. And to me, that's what the problem is. I can't tell my friend, hey, come over and watch this card and check out Sam Alvey, who we're going to interview later today. People don't know who that is because they haven't built him up. They have to build up these smaller guys and forget about front-loading all these cards. I'm done.
You have anything off of that, Ray?
You know what? I'm going to actually disagree. I like what Juice is saying in regards to building people up and, giving them, their due process. But I think it should be both in the sense of this. I think it's good that they're front-loading cards with 2 title fights. But in the process, introduce your audience that is really some of the common audience to fighters like a Ken Zingano. I think they should really put more behind Kat, obviously, with her, fighting for the title. But, introduce them to the Sam Alveys of the world and some of these unknown quantities, because then the public, when they do get an opportunity, you're not like, who the heck is this? You're like, okay, well, I've seen them grow and develop, whatever. It doesn't have to be long video stuff on them, but just a little bit. I think it's great that they are going to 2 title fights, because Dave and I talked about this months ago, that you would only get 1 title fight. We would look at, his man cave and his garage is just an MMA museum. He should charge an admissions fee to be able to get in there. But we're looking at the posters from years back, and it would be 3 amazing fights. You'd get 2 title fights and just these banging cards. And now I think they're trying to get back to that, especially with and I promise you, and I don't, just because I'm involved in both sports, guys, I don't want you guys one avenue or the other, but you better believe the UFC. It's funny how times changed. Years ago, the UFC said, oh, we're doing what boxing isn't. Now, boxing is on network TV. You got the biggest fight in the past 15 years coming up. And it's like the UFC has to raise their game to match what boxing is doing, especially here in 2015. So very interesting times in the world of combat sports. But I do think fighters like Kat Zingano and Sam Alvey and other up-and-coming fighters should get a little due process and get some play, because as we all know, guys, nothing is for sure when it comes to that octagon door when it shuts.
Hey, Ray, I got a question. Mayweather-Pacquiao, Cinco de Mayo that weekend. If you're the UFC, you stay completely off the TV that weekend.
Yes, 1,000%, because no, everyone's going to be in Vegas. If anything, I would do, because they're going to be, it's going to be a swell of combat sports fans that go upon Las Vegas. I would do meet and greets with some of my champions at the Las Vegas Fight Shop during that week. Because people are going to be out and about, as you guys know, in the casinos, walking around, hanging out, and do meet and greets with John Jones. Do a meet and greet with Chris Weidman. Do a meet and greet with whoever the 135-pound champion after Saturday is. You like how I did that, Dave? You know what I mean? I didn't want to go ahead and say it was.
Hey, nothing but professionalism. You should have seen my face. Didn't even flinch when you said that.
Well, just speaking of the schedule real quickly, the UFC has 186 scheduled for April 25th, and then their next event is a Fight Pass event down in Australia on May 9th. So obviously they didn't know Pacquiao-Mayweather was going down yet when they came out with the yearly schedule back in November, but they avoided that weekend. So it's not like they have to move things around. They already maybe had that planned in there just in case something was going down, so they are not touching that weekend at all.
It's very smart, guys, because it's going to be, I'm hearing reports that media from all over the world that it is going to be, put it this way, the 17,000 people that get into the MGM Grand on May 2nd, it's going to be like the world's glitziest country club, to be honest with you.
And hopefully we'll have Ray. Maybe we'll get him live from the swell that is Las Vegas come fight week. Maybe we'll get him
I'll be there, guys. I'll definitely be in Las Vegas for sure. So if you guys ever need me during that weekend, we'd love to be able to join you.
Sweet.
All right, we'll of course break down all those fights when they happen here coming up, or hopefully they happen. In the case of Cain Velasquez and Chris Weidman, there's a good chance they get injured again, and we don't see those fights. So let's move on to some fights that are for sure going to take place this Friday on the UFC Fight Pass. Invicta FC 11 from the Shrine Auditorium in Los Angeles. The main event for Invicta's 145 title, Christine Cyborg Santos against Charmaine Tweet. That is the big headliner. Also some notable names, Mizuki Inoue, Deanna Bennett is also fighting on this card. And I know obviously the big fight there is Cyborg Santos, but kind of looking over some of the other names, kind of what's going on this weekend, and obviously, Ray, with your knowledge of Invicta, are you kind of surprised Invicta didn't kind of shuffle in another title fight in this picture?
No, Jim, you know why? Because the crowd's already going to be there. They don't have to go to a different location or whatever and actually be the only game in town. The UFC's there, obviously, the night after, and I think that they're going to have a lot of people that are going to be UFC fans and UFC personnel that are going to go just out of intrigue. So you show some of your up-and-coming fighters and you go ahead and you put that on display. I think it's fine. I would rather see a card, if they do a card next month, be front-loaded instead of a card that is already going to have a built-in audience, have a lot of – you put it this way, guys. You already have the stake in the UFC on Saturday, and this is a Jim Ross term. On Friday night with Invicta, you have the sizzle. And in order to be able to have the stake, you're going to see the sizzle first. So people are going to go to both.
Oh, yeah. Ray, I've been telling people at my work, and I'm not crazy when I say this, but this is not an easy fight for Cyborg, is it?
Not at all. This is going to be – she's got a lot of pressure. There are intangibles you got to look at. You know that she understands that UFC personnel is going to be there. She understands that fans all over the world are going to be so high on women's MMA. I mean, what a weekend for women's MMA. And coincidentally, one of your sponsors, Fight Chicks, which has been at the forefront of the women's MMA movement, will actually be in Los Angeles as well. But you look at a co-main event, a main event on the UFC, the night before, an all-women's MMA show with Invicta. How unbelievable is it? And if you're Cyborg, you have to carry that torch. You have to not only look good, you have to look great, to then she can go to the Staples Center on Saturday and kind of bang on the octagon door if Ronda defeats Katsugano and say, I told you I wanted you, let's do it now. But she has to look impressive, and that's a lot of pressure on somebody's shoulders.
Yeah, to me, it's absolutely crazy, and we'll break it down more when we go to 184. But I would not be shocked, and I would love to see the numbers on a Zingano Pennington tweet parlay to see what kind of numbers you could get back for a small donation, because I don't think all three will win, but it's a possibility. It's the fight game, and that could literally change the landscape of women's MMA if all three of those victories turn out the opposite way of what people think.
And also a fun fact on Charmaine Tweet, her first ever pro fight, she lost a round to Rousey by an armbar in 49 seconds. Just a fun fact.
Also a fun fact, she's sponsored by Fight Chicks.
It's a fun fact. No, but since that first loss, she's rebounded very well. Her last two fights, she's finished both of them inside the first round. Her only loss of note was against Julia Budd, who's now with Bellator, but Julia Budd is a very solid competitor at 145 pounds, and that was back in Invicta FC7. So she's definitely worthy of getting a shot at Cyborg. She obviously has the submission background, and that's, to me, probably her key, because you really don't want to mix things up with Cyborg. She's very powerful, very strong, and so if she gets taken down, which is a very likely possibility, she has to try to work the submission game, I think, quickly, because Cyborg, I think in her last fight, going 4 rounds, just pretty much pounding Marlis Kunin, she can do that for a very long time. So it's not something, if I wait my time, maybe I'll get an opening. Like, she's going to continue to be coming and hitting hard with every single punch. So I think if you're Tweet, you want to try to get out of this thing quickly, because Cyborg is an animal.
Oh yeah.
All right. Well, let's transition. Ray, anything to add before we? You were only able to join us for a few minutes this morning. Anything
guys,
you wanted to add before we let you go here?
Gentlemen, all I want to say is that I guess having done Holly Holmes, some of her fights, especially her last few boxing matches. Oh, by the way, fun fact, guys, I'm never a self-promoter, but if you go to the countdown for UFC 184, I'm actually, I make a quick cameo for like 3 or 4 seconds. I don't know if you guys have seen it and stuff.
I got text messages about it, Ray.
Huh?
I got text messages from fans, like Aaron, my buddy Aaron. He was like, "Hey, did you see Ray on the countdown?" I'm like, yes, I did.
I thought it was hilarious, man. I didn't know about it until a buddy of mine told me and stuff. So I don't know. I thought that was interesting, but
it's cool.
It's just real cool. But Holly Holm, very talented, such a nice person. But man, she's got dynamite in her hands. She's got dynamite in her feet. And I know Raquel Pennington is a tough fighter and brings it every single time and is, well-rounded. But Holly Holm's a different level. It is very hard to prepare for that kind of striking. On the opposite end, when it comes to Ronda Rousey and Cat Zingano, Cat's going to take Ronda into some deep waters. Ronda is a machine, and she's mowing through people. But let's be correct here, guys. Ronda Rousey is the female Mike Tyson. Will Cat Zingano be Buster Douglas? I think she's better. If we're looking at odds-wise, Cat Zingano is not Buster Douglas. Cat Zingano could very well be Evander Holyfield. And the reason why I say that is because Evander Holyfield dealt with a lot of different tribulations and different obstacles in his life. There was talk that he wouldn't even fight again because of the heart condition that he had. With Cat Zingano, with all the tribulations she's had from a personal standpoint, and now to be able to get past that and still be able to, lead by example and be a great influence and a great, sort of role model for her son, the time is now for her, and it's going to be very interesting to see what happens at the Staples Center in Los Angeles on Saturday on pay-per-view.
Couldn't have been said any better. Couldn't have been said any better.
Also, too, before I get out of here, guys, I just want to say, love listening to the podcast on the road. Been fortunate to be on the road frequently, and love listening to what you guys do. Beyond the Cage has me amped up, Actually, people that sit next to me when it comes to flights, because you guys make me laugh so much, I can't go to myself. They think I'm crazy, but they think I'm crazy because I am friends with you guys and because I listen to Beyond the Cage. So I am all about laughing to myself when I'm on planes and when I'm in airports and stuff like that. Keep doing what you're doing. I love the knowledge. Jim, you continue to grow, and just, my goodness, your knowledge is off the charts. Juice, your commentary is second to none. If newspapers were relevant, I would say you should have an editorial page when it comes to the world of mixed martial arts and combat sports. With that, gentlemen, I say have a great one, and I look forward to talking with you real soon.
He is Ray Flores of ESPN 1000 in Chicago. You can follow him on Twitter at RayFlores86. And once again, thanks for coming on the show, and we'll have you on again real soon.
You're the man, gentlemen. Have a great one.
All right, Ray. As I said, Ray Flores there, ESPN 1000 Chicago. You can follow him on Twitter at RayFlores86. And let's transition one more quick preview. We got to talk about the British invasion, Bellator 134 in Connecticut. Unfortunately, Dave, the British invasion not as heavy as originally planned, as this card has suffered not one but two big losses, with Douglas Lima getting hurt a few weeks ago, and now the recent development of one Mr. Michael Page getting hurt in his fight, getting scrapped out this card. So, although it still technically is a British invasion, this card, the once much hyped British invasion card, now, not to say it's a bad card, but it's somewhat of a disappointment. But we still get a great main event with Liam McGarry against Emmanuel Newton. I am really excited about that fight. I'm not excited about that they added to the card with all these injuries, Dave. King Mo against Czech Congo at heavyweight, which doesn't fit their theme of British invasion because Congo's from France. So, in King Mo moving up, I don't know. That, I think, is what throws kind of this card off more so than any of the injuries. Of course, I will be watching, but it kind of stinks that Bellator had a card that people were, I think, legitimately interested in watching. People were really talking about this card as soon as all their first 4 months of events were talking about. This one was circled on everyone's calendar, and now it kind of not complete. It's almost kind of fell through on them a little bit.
Yeah, doesn't this go into the conversation we just had with Ray, that when you front load a card and it falls apart, you have not a whole lot to kind of fall back on. I mean, the fights that they currently have, I'm a big fan of Brennan Ward, and he's on the main card now. So
yep, he was just added to the card with the Page injury.
Yeah, and I mean, like that. So that's a cool fight. I mean, I like him personally, but I mean,
and they also were able to keep Paul Daly on the card too, which I think does help. But yeah, like I said, you kind of lose some of that appeal. And, the undercard's decent, Dave. If you have to look at it, we got Tamden McCrory. He's going to be taking a fight against Jason Butcher. You also have Matt Bassett, who had that huge victory over Diego Nunes not too long ago. So you got some guys who have been around in Bellator for a while, and, obviously most of these won't be shown on the main card, but, nice names, but again, not as good as we were expecting, just a few weeks ago.
Yeah. I mean, it'll be DVR'd, and I'll watch it when I get home from work. But, I'll watch it for what it is, but it stinks when they try to promote something for a month, month and a half, 2 months, and then it can't deliver.
And for Bellator, just real quickly, obviously, the UFC has had a lot of injury problems, but of course they're putting on more events and have more fighters than Bellator. But in terms of, recent memory, I can't speak for every Bellator fight, but at least within the last 2-3 years, Dave, is this one of the few cards you can remember Bellator really having a lot of injury problems? It doesn't seem like they have had as many compared to the UFC. Again, like I said, less events, less fighters, but it seems like they haven't had as many, the injury bug hit them as much as the UFC. And this is the one card I can really remember in recent memory where they've had, not one but two big fights kind of have to be scrapped.
Yeah, like you just said, not as many fights, not as many fighters, but it seemed like when they were doing the tournaments last year, it seemed like they were getting hit pretty hard with injury, weight cuts, and stuff like that. But like I said, it stinks that it's happening to this card. The one that they put, they put posters together and all that. So
Yeah, I guess they've had injuries in tournaments, but I think the thing with the tournaments, it's more focused on the tournament as a whole than it is more any one individual fighter.
Yeah, that's
And
fair.
so it's not as noticeable as, hey, this was supposed to have two title fights, and then Sokaju and this and that, and now it's reduced to one title fight. Paul Daly fighting a guy that Bellator wants him to beat desperately, so they can have him fight Douglas Lima, and then they throw in a weird fight with King Mo and Congo. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Hey, let me point something out real quick for you. Did you read the? I'm efforting something as I speak here. You're going to be blown away. Did you read the article that they were selling, or they were looking for seat fillers for this card? Did you see
Yes.
that?
Yes, I did.
That's something crazy, huh?
Yes, especially at this event, and obviously the Mohegan Sun there in Connecticut, a pretty nice venue. A lot of people on the East Coast, they don't get events there like that too often. You would think that that would be a relatively easy ticket for them to sell. But maybe with some of these fights being canceled, Dave, maybe some people dropped their reservations or whatever, and thus led to being seat fillers. But there's a reason why when people say, oh, the Bellator is number 2 to UFC, I go, well, yeah, but that's like, to me, the UFC is the major leagues and Bellator is still AA. They may be number 2, but there's a big gap between 1 and 2.
Okay.
Because have you ever heard of the UFC using seat fillers?
No.
So that they're basically paying people to watch their event.
I would be up for that.
I mean, I'm not saying I wouldn't do it. I'm just saying, what does that say about your product?
Right. Okay. So here's what I found. If you go to Bellator's homepage real quick, they have a thing. It says exclusive VIP experience, front row seats, British Invasion prize pack, including T-shirt, poster, souvenir, post-event meet and greet with legend and ambassador Hoist Gracie. $424 is what that cost.
Well, I mean, you get to sit next to Hoist Gracie.
No, you get to meet Hoist Gracie.
Well, meet him. That's what I meant.
Okay. UFC 184 for the same price point. You can sit directly center octagon. Like if you were at hockey seats, you'd be like at center ice. Like, in that section that goes up right there for the same price. Decisions.
It's true, but
I just thought
yeah,
that was weird. You're having seat fillers, but you'll try to sell a $430 ticket.
Maybe they gotta adjust some things in Bellator then again.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, seat fillers. I think it'd be one thing, Dave, if they had seat fillers and it wasn't somehow publicly known, but I think the fact it's gotten out, a lot of people in the MMA fan community know about this. As cool as it would be to be a seat filler, don't get me wrong, I just think it ends up looking bad on them. Yeah. I think it's one thing to say, hey, if you sign up to our website or do something, we'll give you a free ticket. That sounds better than saying, hey, we need people to fill seats. Do you get what I'm saying? There's a difference between saying people you need to fill seats as opposed to giving away free tickets. Because then that looks cool, like, oh, they're giving away tickets when they could be selling them for money. Little do people know that they aren't going to sell those tickets, but still, people don't know that.
Right. And Bellator's usually pretty good at making it appear that there's millions of people there. Like, you've been to the show. Like, they'll be like, everybody get closer to the walkout because we're gonna film this walkout right now, and it looks like there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of people there, and the ones that I've been to haven't been super packed, but whatever. Do your thing, Viacom. Do your thing, Viator.
All right, well, let's get to this weekend's UFC Fight Night 61 from Porto Alegre, Rio de Janeiro, Brazil, or Rio del Sol, Brazil, rather. 6 fights were shown on the main card, and overall, Dave, I believe there were 12 fights, if I count that correctly. and I'm sorry, 11 fights. And of those 11 fights, 10 of the underdogs in those matchups won. Now, I don't know if that's a UFC record, but that's got to be pretty close.
I think 11 of 11 happened once.
Okay, but I mean, in the recent memory, it has not happened. I want to say, I think that, remember when Phil Davis beat Glover Teixeira?
Yeah.
I think 8 underdogs won that night, and that was the most for a while. And this even eclipsed that with 10. I believe, I'm trying to see who was the only.
I think it went in order. I think that Ivan George, he was the favorite
against Shockley.
Yeah.
Okay, and then all the other ones, yeah, kind of looking over that looks about right. Some of those probably were going to be pretty close, but I know for sure, definitely Jessica Andrade losing in the first round. That might be the biggest one, I think, Dave.
Oh yeah.
Of the night, Andrade, I think, with the win, put herself maybe 1 or 2 from a title shot. She was going on a really nice roll. She was, I believe, ranked in the top 10. That's a big victory, especially, like I said, getting submitted in the first round. That's huge. And then really the only other big one, at least on the undercard, Matt Dwyer against Padalino was kind of big. But on the main card, first fight, Santiago Ponzinibbio against Sean Strickland was an upset, and I think the reason people were picking Strickland as an upset, obviously he's coming down from 185 pounds. People thought he'd be a lot bigger than Ponzinibbio, especially that victory at 185 pounds was against a huge man known as Luke Barnett, and Sean Strickland was able to get that victory. But at 170, Dave, I don't know if it was the weight cut, the humidity, the aggressiveness of Ponzinibbio, but I was not very impressed with Sean Strickland. It just didn't seem like he was really throwing with a lot of conviction, and it just didn't seem like he was really doing a lot to damage, I think, Ponzinibbio. And I think really, with the exception of kind of he had a nice stretch there in the first round, it just seems like Ponzinibbio was kept on gaining on him. And looking at the total strikes, Ponzinibbio outstruck Strickland 54-46. They both threw about the same amount of strikes. But I think that aggressive nature and just keep moving forward and landing a lot of big bombs, I think, is what led to the victory for the man from Argentina.
Yeah, some of these fights, especially coming off of the big upset with Andrade losing, and then who was the guy? Dwyer is the guy that did the Superman punch. Coming off of that, it was kind of like, oh, this fight, I mean, probably not the best fight to kick off on Fox Sports 1, in my mind.
No, it was definitely a lull. I mean, it's not because of Ponzinibbio. I thought he was relatively, trying to do his best. But like I said, I don't know what it was with Strickland. It just seemed like he had a good jab, but I mean, a guy like Ponzinibbio, you need to throw more than a jab to stop him. I think he's proven he's a pretty tough guy.
Right.
He definitely, I think Strickland has the tools. This is only his first loss in his career, but I think at 170 he did pick the right weight class. I think he's better suited for that weight class, but he's got to learn to be more active and kind of know when to go for it and have a sense of urgency. It didn't seem like any point in that fight, Dave, he had a sense of urgency to try to finish Ponzinibbio.
No. And especially at 170, if you have the opportunity to go for the finish, you got to do that.
All right, the next fight of the evening was at 135 pounds as early. Alcantara took on Frankie Saenz, and this was a big upset. And once again, Dave, I want to talk about maybe kind of being inactive and not having a sense of urgency. I think that's what you can say here for Alcantara. Now, first, let me just say the thrown strikes number. Saenz threw 184 strikes to just 77 for Alcantara.
Can't win a fight.
If that's just one thing, and then you look at land strikes, he got outstruck 122-49.
Can't win a fight doing that.
Saenz had 3 takedowns, 2 for Alcantara, but I think really the sticking point and the reason the strikes really piled up, it seemed like Alcantara was really willing to be off his back in this fight, and especially in that second round, Dave, where he got hit with a lot of big shots. It was kind of like, all right, he has to realize he can't lay off his back in this fight. These guys are too sweaty with that heat and humidity for him to really pull off a good, armbar or triangle choke submission. He should get up. and try to get back on the feet, where I thought in the first round, Dave, which is the only round I would have probably gave Alcantara, I thought he was the better stand-up fighter in this fight. And I think had he continued to keep it on the feet, avoid the clinch, avoid laying on his back and trying a submission, I think he could have won this fight and probably should have won this fight. But he kind of got too complacent there, thinking, oh, my jiu-jitsu's better than this guy. And, when you got a guy like Saenz who probably doesn't have as good a jiu-jitsu, Dave, but is a very good wrestler, it neutralized the jiu-jitsu, and he just got pounded in the face. And the judges gave Saenz the fight.
Yeah, this was the fight where Alcantara, he was ranked like 8 or something, right?
Yeah. Alcantara was, this was a fight to get him back fighting someone like a Uriah Faber.
Yeah, it just, this is one of those chances for Frankie where, he comes out here and does what he needs to do, and he makes a name for himself off a guy like Alcantara, and it just complacency will kill you, and it really seems like that's what it was. You can't go into a fight and land 50 punches, 50 punches, which is about a quarter of what your opponent threw. You landed a quarter of what your opponent threw. Like, Frankie's always going to look more active if you're not doing anything, and just puts Alcantara 3 fights back at least. He's got to battle his way back, and it's weird. I'm sure he didn't wake up and was like, oh, I'm just going to go out there and look flat. I don't know if it's the heat, the humidity, or what it is, but he just shows up and it's just like, blah.
Yeah, not a good performance. And Saenz, instead of Alcantara kind of getting back to somebody, with up in the bantamweight division, now Saenz will get that chance.
Yeah.
So,
actually,
missed opportunity for the Brazilian Alcantara there.
Well, let's just make sure that that's the bantamweight division, correct?
Yes.
Uri Alcantara, even losing to an unranked guy, goes from number 8 to number 10.
And Saenz is probably still not ranked, right?
No, Saenz is 12. Went from not ranked to 12. He jumps Eric Perez, Alex Caceres, and Mitch Gagnon.
Well, I'm glad he's ranked higher, but I think he's going to get a higher ranked opponent. I mean, he just beat the number 8 guy. So
let's do the math here. Frankie Saenz beat Uri Alcantara, who lost to Uriah Faber. So that means Frankie Saenz could totally beat Uriah Faber. Isn't that how MMA math works?
Well, he could probably come close, maybe. I don't know. We'll see.
Right.
It's a fight. I don't know if he'll get that fight next, but I think Brian Caraway's still high ranked up there. Our good friend Eddie Wineland. There's some good guys that he can take on. I think Brad Pickett said he was thinking about moving back to 135. There's some solid guys for him to take on the next level of competition. I think those guys would be up there.
How about this? I don't know who has fights in bantamweight, but how about Frankie Saenz versus Johnny Eduardo?
That's a good one too.
Johnny guy, he's the one who beat Eddie. And it was kind of I think it was a lucky punch. But prove it against a guy like Frankie Saenz and then move on up the bantamweight division.
All right, the next fight of the evening, I think kind of a snoozer. If the first two maybe didn't kind of get you off, this next one maybe had you turn to the channel as Rustam Khabilov took on Adriano Martins. And, boy, how do you like this, Dave? 15 minutes of fighting, right? These two guys combined landed 38 strikes.
Nice.
That's awful. I know. That is absolutely horrible. And Martins did land 3 or 4 takedowns. 2 of them were inside the 3rd round, which most notably gave him that round. But, Kenny was on Khabilov for saying, oh, this guy's not active. Both were inactive. I don't know what it was. I don't know if it was too much respect for each other or we talked about heat, humidity, weight cut. Whatever the case is, these two guys, it didn't seem like they wanted to hit each other on Sunday night. And this was a horrible fight, and when it's a horrible fight, it usually means it's a close fight. And, like I said, Martins definitely got that third round. You can make a case whoever you want for the other two, but, really to me, they both lost. Martins gets the upset win, though, Dave, but this was a horrible performance by both, and neither should be proud of their effort on Sunday night.
Yeah, my favorite statistic from here is that Martins had 1 minute and 57 seconds of control, and Khabibulov had 5 seconds of control in an entire 15-minute fight. 5 seconds.
Yeah, and like I said, so of the 15 minutes, so looking at the striking numbers, Khabibulov landed 19 total strikes of 81 thrown, and Martins, you could even say, was less inactive as he landed 17 of 44. These guys were landing about 1 strike per minute. 1 strike. Do you know how many strikes you can throw in 1 minute?
A lot.
Probably more than 60. I can tell you that much. I'm so disgusted. We're moving on because it's a huge loss for Khabibulov because now 2 losses in a row. He kind of loses that aura that he had kind of built up, Dave. He really goes down. Martins, it helps. It's another win, but like I said, a bad performance, and I don't think it really moves him up the rankings despite being a guy touted like Khabibulov. All right, let's get to the next fight where I think the main card at least picked up, Dave, and that's where Sam Alvey took on former Ultimate Fighter Brazil winner Cesar Ferreira. And very few fights, Dave, you can land 4 strikes and win. But as the case here with Smilin Sam Alvey, as he landed 4 strikes, and that was all he needed to knock out the former Ultimate Fighter winner at 334 in the first round after a great right-left hook combination that set Mutante crashing to the canvas. Mari Yamasaki had to step in this one to stop it. And for fans watching, if we're going to talk to Sam Alvey right after the show, so if there's anything you'd like Dave and I to ask, send us your tweets at Jim Graham and at Vigilante Juice, or comment on our Facebook page, facebook.com/Beyond the Cage podcast. But we're really excited to talk to Sam. But this was interesting, and we're going to ask him this. He said post-fight his strategy was to get kicked a few times and hopefully he could land something to knock him out. We're going to ask him if that really was his strategy or if he was just joking around with John. But if you look at the tape and you didn't hear the audio, that kind of seemed like that was his strategy, was to take some punches and hope he could land a counter, and that's basically what he did.
Yeah, a couple of questions I want to ask him. Did he ever think that a left-right combination like that would get him as many fans? Because I saw people all over Twitter that were like, oh, I'm following Sam Alvey, like, who is this guy, blah, 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 all different sorts of, guys in my work are like, hey, did you see this video? And I'm like, yeah, you should totally tune into the podcast Wednesday on Facebook and YouTube.
But yeah, Sam Alvey, great performance. It shows that, one punch can change a fight, and I think that's what happened. And, this was, to me, his coming out party. A lot of people, maybe they don't know, he had a first-round knockout over Dylan Andrews. Very impressive. But as we mentioned, earlier on with Dave, that was a Fight Pass event. All the fights were on Fight Pass. So I don't know how many people actually tuned in to see that fight against Sam Alvey. And obviously there were a lot of great knockouts on that card as well. So this time around, main card, first round knockout, not a huge name, but a name, at least in Brazil, is really big in Ferreira. Knocks him out in the first round. And unlike his victory against Andrews, I think, kind of waking up the main card there definitely prompted, and he did get his performance of the night bonus this time around for his first round knockout.
Yeah, very impressive. Equally impressive is the fact that, he hasn't had a whole lot of UFC fights, and the key to making a run is being healthy. And he didn't take too much damage, and he didn't put forth a lot of effort. So if he wants to get back in, and I'm sure we can ask him, I'm sure he'd rather get back in sooner rather than later.
The next fight of the evening, the co-main event, Michael Johnson against Edson Barboza at the 155-pound division. A lot on the line in this one, Dave, but I think the main key to this fight and the main reason Mr. Michael Johnson won was not only moving forward, but moving forward and throwing strikes and landing the most of them. And to me, I think Michael Johnson took what Bobby Green did in his last fight against Barboza, chasing him down, backing him up against the cage, not allowing a lot of room. But the thing that Bobby Green didn't do that Michael Johnson did in this fight was be active with strikes, throw those punches and bunches and get Barboza off his game. Because I think he saw if you can kind of crowd Barboza, you can get him off his game a little bit. And he crowded him, but he had the strikes to back it up. And this time around, unlike Bobby Green, Michael Johnson got the victory, and that's kind of proven here by the strikes. Michael Johnson, again, this is just thrown strikes. He out-threw Edson Barboza 192-98.
Yeah.
He was in his face from start to finish, Dave. And, you actually look at the total striking numbers. Michael Johnson didn't outstrike him that much more, just 43-31 in terms of strikes landed. But I think that constant pressure in his face, I think, really threw Barboza off his game, which a lot of those big strikes and big kicks you need space for. Michael Johnson did not give him that space in this fight, and I thought it was a masterful performance and definitely deserving of the unanimous decision victory.
Yeah, I think that was actually a perfect fight from Michael Johnson. I really don't think that there's a whole lot that he could have improved on. I mean, he took a very dangerous guy in Edson Barboza and just pressured him and, kept in his face for 15 minutes, and very deserved victory at very deserved unanimous decision victory, obviously, and according to these amazing rankings, he's now 6 at the lightweight division. And, every time he fights, I keep saying it, Jim, every single time he fights, we see a more improved Michael Johnson. He's one of those guys that he is definitely not happy where he's currently at. No matter win or lose, he gets to work immediately upon leaving that octagon and preparing for his next fight.
Definitely big things coming up here for Michael Johnson, and for Barboza, he's just going to have to learn how to deal with pressure later. This is now 2 fights in a row where he's been pressured, and he's been 1-1 in those. So that is something, obviously, that any upcoming fights, his opponents, they're going to look at these 2 fights and go, all right, this is the blueprint to how to beat Edson Barboza. You can't give this guy space. So for Barboza, he's going to have to either learn to circle more, pressure more of his own, throw with a little more frequency, or, he's been working with Frankie Edgar and those guys in New Jersey, maybe work a little more on his takedowns. Those are the things I would see Edson Barboza would need to work on.
Yeah. It's interesting. Barboza, I still think, can be a player in that division, but Michael Johnson, if they move him to 6, there's some interesting fights there for him moving forward. So.
Mm-hmm. All right, the main event of the evening, Antonio Bigfoot Silva against Frank Mir, where I think we were right, Dave, where the loser, I think, should retire. And I think with Bigfoot Silva suffering another first-round knockout, this time at the hands of Frank Mir, who was on a 4-fight losing streak and hadn't fought in the UFC in over a year, I think it's time Bigfoot Silva, hung up the gloves. And for Frank Mir, it's a nice victory. It doesn't really do much for you. Maybe you get one more fight. I'm going to be honest, I would like to see a trilogy fight against Brock Lesnar. I know it was rumored about. I don't know if Brock will ever come back to the UFC. If he does, that is a fight I'd like to see. But in terms of really fighting anyone else, Dave, I'm not really sure he's beating much more than guys the caliber of Bigfoot Silva. I'm not saying he got lucky. I think he definitely is better than Bigfoot Silva. But like I said, I don't think there's that much left for him. I'm not going to take too much away from this victory.
Yeah, it's like you said, it's a win. I'll
put it this way: it was more of an exciting fight than I thought it was going to be. If that helps.
I mean, he beat somebody who's challenged for, supremacy in the division, but never really got over that hump. He took some time off, came back, was victorious. Can't hate the guy for that. the Lesnar fight is intriguing, I guess. But Frank
But I
Mir's
would
not
say any fight with Brock Lesnar is intriguing.
true.
I mean, the Mir one, could. I'm going to be honest. The Mir one could sell a pay-per-view on its own without a title fight very
Okay.
easily. Mir Lesnar 3.
Well, I'll counter your point. Yes, any fight with Lesnar is intriguing. Any fight with Mir that doesn't have Lesnar in it is not intriguing.
That is also true. Equally true. Equally true. All right. Well, speaking of pay-per-views, let's get to this pay-per-view for Saturday, February 28th from the Staples Center in Los Angeles on pay-per-view UFC 184. I know people are kind of off it, Dave, because it doesn't have 2 title fights. You heard some people maybe boycotting it, but honestly, this is a pretty solid card, in my opinion. And the first fight of the evening, I'm excited about this one. Tony Ferguson against Gleison Tibau in the lightweight division. Looking at Tony Ferguson, 7-1 in the UFC. He's currently riding a 4-fight winning streak. His last fight was a victory over Abel Trujillo at 181, and 9 of his 17 career victories are by knockout. Looking at Tibau, 16-8 in the UFC. He is riding a 3-fight winning streak, which in all his years in the UFC is actually a tie. He's only done that one other time, won 3 fights in a row. So for Tibau, that's really good. His last fight was a win over Norman Park at the Fight Night in Boston, and 16 of his 33 career victories are by decision. Once again, Dave, and it's the same game plan I told Norman Park to use, which he didn't, and he lost. And it's the game plan I'm going to tell one Mr. Ferguson to use. With that long reach and lanky frame, keep him at bay and keep circling, with the jab and the leg kicks. Make him chase you, force him to use up that energy. And the third round, just unload on him. And I think Tony Ferguson is completely capable of that. And I would also say Tony Ferguson probably has a little more power than Norman Park. And I think maybe a little more willingness to go for the finish than Norman. No offense to Norman, I do like him, but Tony Ferguson has a lot more, knockout finishes in his career. And a fight for Ferguson, I wouldn't say a step back from Abel Trujillo, but it's a fight where if Tony Ferguson beats, this will run his winning streak to 5. He, much like Michael Johnson, puts himself in a position, to face some really top contenders in the lightweight division.
Yeah, I don't think there's very many lightweights that are lining up to fight Tony Ferguson. He's a tricky fella. He's a lot like our friend Neil Magny, where he might not be, both of those guys might not be the most skilled guys in their divisions, the most athletic, the best cardio, but they're just tricky enough to where I don't think there's anybody above Ferguson in the rankings that is just clamoring for that fight. He's just there's too many tools that he's got, and he's just tricky enough to where nobody wants that fight. With that being said, I think we said it before. I think Gleison Tibau's a glorified gatekeeper. A win over Ferguson, I don't think that moves him that far up. To where we can start talking about 2 or 3 wins away from a title shot. I just think the time has passed for that.
The only way it does is if Tibau gets a finish, which the majority of the time he does not. If you look at most of his wins in the UFC, most of them are actually split decisions, let alone unanimous decisions. He's kind of the king of decisions. So if he finishes Ferguson, I will be shocked. I'm not shocked that he can win a split decision. It seems like he can do that just about against anybody. But if he could actually get a finish, then maybe we can talk about Tibau, fighting some steady competition. But even if he beats a guy like Ferguson and wins by split decision, I don't think it does much.
Hey, so I'm trying to stay up on Twitter so that we can give our fans nothing. If there's breaking news, I can keep them apprised of this situation. I just found out via Twitter that the Capitals are playing the Penguins on the NBC Sports Network tonight, and that's just great news. As a Caps fan, that's great. I didn't even know. How did I not know?
I don't know, Dave. You didn't say your Google alerts. Got to check those.
God.
All right, our next fight of the evening in the welterweight division, Alan Joe Boy against Richie Walsh. Looking at Joe Boy, 1-1 in the UFC. His last fight was a loss to Warley Alves at the Fight Night in Uberlândia, Brazil. 7 of his 10 career victories are by knockout. Looking at Walsh, also 1-1 in the UFC. His last fight was a loss to Kunimoto back at the UFC in Tokyo, Japan, and 4 of his 8 career victories are by knockout. Now, the reason this is an interesting fight to me, Dave, most people maybe don't know, they maybe didn't see this, but both Joe Boy and Walsh, in my opinion, got screwed over in their last fights. If you look at both those fights, I think both of them won their fights, but the decision did not go their way, and lo and behold, both those fights were in their opponent's home country. Now, they're both fighting here, not quite neutral, because obviously Joe Boy is from America, but they're both fighting where they're, maybe more neutral ground here in LA, and I think with both guys getting screwed over in their last fight, I think they both are going to come out kind of with a fire to go out there and maybe get a finish and prove, take it out of the judges' hands this fight. And I think we're actually going to see a really exciting fight between these two gentlemen.
This is going to be a very funny joke that nobody's going to get, but I feel bad for Joe Buen. This is the first time he's ever fought in UFC without Ovin St. Peru around. That's hilarious if you look back at the 2 fights that he's had have both been St. Peru cards. Nothing?
Nothing.
Crickets. All right. The only thing that I can remember about Joe Buen is how disgusting the knockout was against Seth Baczynski. And how
what a fight that was. That was a great fight.
Yeah, how Chris yeah. The Walsh was the guy from The Ultimate Fighter, right?
Yeah, he was on the Smashes. Or not the Smashes, the Australia-Canada season.
Yeah.
Tough Nations.
Yeah, they all run together. With both of his fights being decisions, that the striking of Joe Buen, it was pretty destructive in that Baczynski fight. So, we'll see what Walsh wants to do. Both coming off of losses, they're both going to have to, obviously look to impress because what division is that? Welterweight. There's plenty of guys in the welterweight division, and they got to do something to stick out if they want to stick around.
Especially with them both getting opportunity to fight on a pay-per-view main card.
Yep.
That's a big deal. All right, the next fight of the evening, speaking of the welterweight division, we have Josh Koscheck against Jake Ellenberger. Looking at Koscheck, 15-8 in the UFC, but it's been a while since he fought, and that was a very devastating knockout loss to Tyron Woodley back at UFC 167. He's currently riding a 3-fight losing streak, and 7 of his 17 career victories are by knockout. Looking at Ellenberger, 8-5 in the UFC, much like Koscheck, he is also riding a 3-fight losing streak. His last fight was a loss to Kelvin Gastelum at UFC 180, and 18 of his 29 career victories are by knockout. Now, Ellenberger, obviously a few years younger than Koscheck. I think even if Ellenberger loses, I still think, he could have a future in the UFC and in the sport. But for Koscheck, this is kind of one last chance. If he loses to Jake Ellenberger, I don't care how he loses, whether it's split decision, whether he gets knocked out in the first round, submitted, an eye poke causes the fight to be a DQ. I don't care. If Josh doesn't come out the winner in this fight, the UFC has to set him aside and be like, you can't be fighting anymore, Josh. You culminate already the losing streak with the long layoff. A win would be nice, but it doesn't do much. But yeah, a loss, I think, definitely sends him retired. And for Ellenberger, we said in his last fight, and really the last 3 fights, something's different about him. He's not the same Jake Ellenberger we remember coming into the UFC's first couple of fights, like knocking out Jake Shields and knocking out Jay Haran, or not knocking out Jay Haran, knocking out Nate Marquardt. I mean, I don't know what it is, Dave. Something has not been clicking for the Juggernaut, and I don't know if this is this the fight where we see the real Jake Ellenberger? That's kind of what I'm wondering, Dave. Has Jake Ellenberger made, the adjustments? This is not that long after UFC 180. He didn't take that much time off. We thought maybe this guy takes a few more time out to readjust his game. So I'm really interested to see what Jake Ellenberger comes out here for UFC 184.
Do you think the UFC is going to fly Neil Magny in? and have him sit cage side for this fight?
Maybe.
Because I think the winner of this fights Neil Magny.
I wouldn't be opposed to that, but yeah, I mean, like I said, something's got to change for Ellenberger, though, right? He has to. I think the pressure is on him.
Right. Couple of things. One, Ellenberger is with Ronda at the Glendale Boxing Club or whatever now.
He's been doing some stuff there along with Mark Munoz, Rain MMA, which is also in LA. I think he's kind of been going between the two.
Right. And the other thing, this is totally off on a tangent, but it's my show, our show. We can do what we want. Did you happen to see Embedded 2? The second episode for this year, or this show?
I did not.
They showed Koscheck, like he's in his house, like cooking or whatever, and it's like this amazing mansion. And it's like all this talk about fighter pay and this and that and the other thing. Koscheck's living in a huge house, owns a plane. I just thought it was kind of funny. What's that?
He doesn't own a plane.
He has a plane.
What? You know the own a plane? Like John Travolta owns a plane. That's who owns a plane.
No, he owns like a jet.
I feel like that's more money.
No,
he may
John
own
Travolta,
a little Cessna.
A little airplane costs how much money?
Still.
I'm telling you that he does, because he flies to Fresno and all. Unless he's just got great friends.
Does his wife have money? Is he married?
Maybe Koscheck's very frugal. Maybe he brings Lunchables to the gym.
I don't know. Anyways, continue. Sorry, we're getting off topic here.
No, I think it's with all that talk about fighter pay, and then Josh is living in a mansion. Granted, he's had a billion fights, but
yeah, he's been around since 2005.
Yep.
Right? That was the first season of Ultimate Fighter?
Correct.
Anyway.
Hey, the open workouts are free and open to the public, and they are today. Just want to let you know for UFC 184. I got that tweet right now.
All right. Well, let's get to the. What was that?
Said the Juice, bringing you the news.
All right, let's get to the co-main events of the evening in the women's bantamweight division. Holly Holm against Raquel Pennington. Looking at Holly Holm, she'll be making her UFC debut, currently undefeated in her career. Of her 7 career victories, 6 are by knockouts. She has fought for Legacy Fighting as well as Bellator in her career, and I believe also has a background in professional boxing. So obviously a lot of hype surrounding Holly Holm, and she also trains with Jackson's Gym down there in Albuquerque. Looking at Pennington, 2-1 in the UFC. Her last fight was a very impressive submission victory over Ashley Evans Smith at UFC 181, and 2 of her 5 career victories are by submission. Now, Raquel Pennington does have pretty solid boxing. She showed that, I think, on her stint on The Ultimate Fighter, and I think so far in her 3 fights in the UFC. Is it the level of Holly Holm?
No.
Probably not. Probably not. But she is a tough girl. She is scrappy. And I think Dave does have a decent grappling background. I think better grappling than Holly Holm. The question will be, 1, how quickly will Pennington decide to try to take it to the ground? And 2, if she does, how successful will she be? Obviously, Holm knows that's her weakness and knows that any girl she comes up against the UFC is probably going to try to take her down. How well will she be able to defend the takedown against UFC caliber opponents instead of, I hate to call them, I'll call them cans that she's been fighting in Legacy the last, year or 2.
Yeah. What's Holmes' record?
7-0.
7-0. 6 of her 7 opponents don't have Wikipedia pages, and the one that does is 4-5.
That's what I mean. Not the highest caliber of opponent.
Right. This is why I was saying that I think there's a very realistic chance that Raquel Pennington wins this. Is Raquel Pennington a better stand-up fighter than Holly Holm? Absolutely not. Holly Holm is a 10 when it comes to the striking. Do you think Raquel Pennington wants to stand with her? No. I think we haven't seen anything that proves to us that Holly Holm can even survive on the ground.
Right, because I mean, a lot of those fights have been gone in like a minute.
Yeah. Um,
I don't think she can knock out Pennington in one round. Pennington's
no.
pretty tough.
Yeah.
Um, I
I
think she
don't.
can knock out Pennington, just not in the first round.
Right. I don't understand where the love is that she's gonna be the one to beat Ronda Rousey. Holly Holm. Ronda has terrible striking and won't stand with Holly Holm. Do you think Holly Holm is gonna submit out Ronda?
Right.
Like,
I mean, yeah, we saw Misha Tate, who has okay stand up in that second fight, prove that she had better stand up than Ronda.
and Kat has. I mean, we're gonna get into it, but Kat has better stand up than Misha.
Right. By their fight. So yeah, that's what I mean. It's
Is it fair to say this, Jim, that Kat has better? What's it? Kat has the best MMA stand up at 135 pounds.
she's pretty good. I think Jessica I you could throw up there.
Right. I
But
can
yeah,
agree with
I think that would
I'm,
be that's not that you wouldn't be you're not too off with that statement. I'll put I it might be an argument had, but you can kind of go either way on that. I think.
all right. Hey, real quick, Twitter is alive and well. Our friend DK said that Koscheck cashed in on Tough and his main event with GSP. Our main events with GSP.
Yeah, I
Which
know
is
the tough thing has got him some money, and then the GSP obviously that was a pretty big pay-per-view. But I mean, even still, like a Mansion. Now he's a guy when you look. I'll put it this way: he's a guy when you think of like who has done the best from their MMA career. He's not a guy that you probably mentioned the top 5 of. You know what I mean? Like GSP, Liddell, Silva,
Koscheck.
Couture. How many names do you have to go for before you get to Josh Koscheck? That's all I'm saying.
Right.
It's nothing against the guy, but
All right, Jim.
all right, let's get to this main event. You already brought up, the stand-up as Ronda Rousey takes on Kat Zingano. The interesting point of this fight is not when Kat Zingano will get taken down, because I think it will happen. I think Rousey has proved that she can take down anyone in this division. What will happen when that happens? Zingano has great Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu. Obviously, it's not always showcased in their fight because she's done a lot of top game, but she has proven that she can come back from adversity. She can come back and finish fights, and that's to me the sticking point is, how will she do off her back? And as this fight goes longer, the longer Ronda has to try to do work or whatever, I think that favors Kat Zingano, who seems to be getting stronger as the fight goes on. Now, neither have been past the 4th round. So if it does go that far, I'm not sure what will happen. Now, in the fight that Ronda did have against Misha Tate that did go into the 3rd, I wouldn't necessarily say she was slowing down Dave or that she was that much different than in the 1st, but there's no way she's going to have that same intensity and aggressive nature if this goes to a 4th.
Right.
I think that's fairly safe to say. I don't think it's going to go to 4. I think somebody will get finished before that point. I don't know who. But to me, the part to watch is when Kat Zingano gets taken down, what does she do to stop Ronda? What does she do to get out from that position? Because it will happen. And what can she do to get out from that position and either to keep it from her feet or switch to have her being on top? What happens at that point? And that's when I'm going to be watching for in this matchup. And whatever happens from that exchange, I think will determine who wins this fight.
I want to know a couple of things. What happens if she can't take Kat down? You're saying it's going to happen. What if she can't get Kat to the ground? What does Ronda resort to? If they're up against the cage and the elbows start flying from Kat and Ronda's pretty little face starts bleeding, what happens? These are both things that we haven't seen. We haven't seen Ronda get into a fight and not be able to take somebody down. We haven't seen her bleed, get cut, face adversity. We haven't seen that happen. You know, if you go back to Ronda's fight against Carmouche when they had that neck crank going, she started to like freak out and try all these like wiggling and like, you know, all sorts of crazy stuff trying to get out of it. But what's going to happen if she starts eating knees or elbows or you know, I talked to Ray about it. I talked to a couple other people about it. Maybe Kat hits Ronda with an elbow. Ronda starts bleeding, and she freaks out and becomes Super Ronda and finishes Kat. We don't know. It's never been seen. You know that if Kat starts bleeding, you know she's not going to fade away. You know, kind of like Diego Sanchez. If he starts bleeding, you're screwed. You know what I mean?
Right.
And a couple of things that I find funny leading up to this fight, 10 out of 11 fights 3 nights ago were won by the underdog, but every expert gives Kat Zingano no chance. Where's the logic in that? 10 of 11 underdogs just won, and now, she's got no chance of winning. None.
So I would say, besides the second fight against Tate, I would say in terms of opponent, Kat Zingano has, I don't know what the spread will end up being, but to me, it should be the closest of any opponent Ronda has faced, since the first Miesha Tate fight.
Right.
You can make obviously the second Tate fight ended up being really close. I don't know what the spread was, but this is legitimately the number 2 135-pound woman on the planet.
Right. The numbers don't suggest that.
I'll do my run. Yeah, the odds might not, but just let me do my rundown here, just real quick. I usually do it. Zingano's 2-0 in the UFC. Last fight, victory over Amanda Nunes. 5 of her 9 career victories are by knockout. Rousey's 4-0 in the UFC. Last fight against Davis, no knockout victory. 8 of her 10 career victories are by submission. These girls are both undefeated. They both have a very high finishing rate. In the case of Ronda, she's finished all 10 of her fights. The other 2 are by knockout, and I believe Zingano has a couple of submissions in there too. So, these girls go out there and get finishes, both of them.
Yeah,
and,
I wanted to bring up.
I think that's what kind of makes it closer. It's not like Zingano's, 9 victories are all decisions or something like that.
Right. My daughter just walked in. Hold on one second. I want to bring up 2 points. One, I keep hearing the argument being made that Kat Zingano has ring rust and that she hasn't been in the cage for a long period of time. I just want to remind people that she just won a fight in September that went almost 3 full rounds. Ronda Rousey's last fight technically was February of 2014. 15 seconds into round 1
that's true.
Doesn't technically count.
Yeah.
So everything that all these experts, quote unquote, are saying is very, very, very wrong. Hey, before we get to our picks, come here. Wait 1 second. Grace, come here. Come here. Here's my beautiful daughter, Grace. She's afraid. Hey, is Kat Zingano going to win on Saturday? Thumbs up or thumbs down? Thumbs up. All right.
All right, let's get to picks here. UFC 184, lightweight division, Tony Ferguson, Gleason, T-Bow. Going Mr. Ferguson on this one.
Yeah, I'm taking Ferguson as well.
Alan Joe Boy against Richie Walsh. I think it's going to be a good fight, but I think the stand-up of Joe Boy, I think that's going to be the difference. So give me Alan in this one.
Yeah, I think Joe Boy's going to win via right, left, right combination.
Koscheck against Ellenberger, welterweight division. I don't know. I really don't like Josh Koscheck. I've never been a huge fan of his. I've never cared for his personality. And obviously coming up the long layoff, he's been knocked out kind of brutally the last couple times. I think Ellenberger, despite not clicking in recent developments, I think he's the younger guy, fresher guy. I'll go with the Juggernaut to win.
Yeah. Change the scenery for Ellenberger, so I'm going to go with him.
The co-main event of the evening, Holly Holm against Raquel Pennington. I know a lot of people are going to be picking Holly Holm. A lot of people expect Holm to be running over Pennington. I do not think that. I am going with the upset. I am picking Raquel Pennington to win this fight.
Yeah, I'm going to go with Pennington too. I think the fight goes to the ground relatively early. And kind of what's the right word here? The allure of Holly Holm gets crushed on the ground, I think.
All right, Dave, we know you're going with Kat Zingano in this fight. That's no question. The question is, who am I going with? That's what the people want to know. They know you're all on the Zingano bagland, but who does Jim Gramm pick for UFC 184 to be the UFC Women's Bantamweight Champion?
Before you pick, what's the way? You would make a pick regardless. You wouldn't make a pick just to make me happy, right?
No. All right.
Wait. Before you pick, I just want to show you something, Jim. For those of you watching, see what that says on my shirt?
Garth
Joe
Brooks.
Louis Arena. That's right. Came to the D. How about that? Red Wings colors. Yeah.
Yes. All right, Dave.
Terrible.
My pick for the main event of UFC 184 is Ronda Rousey. Sorry, Dave. Until someone can beat Ronda, that'll change my mind. But I gotta go with it. I'll be rooting for Kat. I hope she pulls the upset, but I'm going with Ronda in this one.
Ronda losing the belt does so much for the UFC's division.
Oh, I know. It messes a lot of things up, and as we said, sometimes the UFC.
Her losing.
Yeah, that's what I said.
But her losing makes a lot. There's a lot more matchups to make.
Well, we've said this a couple times. Sometimes the UFC thinks whatever they do is the best, and promoting this person's the best. But having their one of their golden gooses lose, kind of sets them back a peg. Maybe have them rethink some of the decisions they make. So I think we talked about it a while ago. Like, what if Ronda loses, and what would happen? And it's fun to kind of think about. But all right, any final thoughts here before we end the show?
Yeah. If anybody knows where I can parlay Tweet, Pennington, and Zingano, let me know.
All right.
At Vigilante Juice or right here on our Facebook page.
That's him, at Vigilante Juice on Twitter, Dave Sadler. I am Jim Gramm, at Jim Gramm on Twitter. Thanks again for listening to Beyond the Cage, presented by Fight Chicks. Also, we're going to thank our partners at MMAinsider.net, VigilanteMMA.com, Ray Flores for coming on the show, Bluegrass MMA, Top Rated MMA, of course, AJ Hiller, MMA Signatures, USA.com. So, again, for the Juice, I am Jim Gramm. Thanks for listening to another edition of the Beyond the Cage podcast, presented by Fight Chicks.